We meet here today to pay a final tribute of honor and love and respect to the memory of Eddie Glenn Bush and Joan Marie Flipowitz Bush. We're going to pay a final tribute of love and respect at this time. Eddie was born May 28th, 1948, and parted this life April 23rd, 2020. Joan was born August 28th, 1953, and parted this life April 16th, 2022. They are survived by their children, Brian Bush, Brian Lee Bush, Brad Scott Bush, Mindy Weipert Bush, Glenn Ellen Bush, Amy Lynn Bush, one grandchild, Felicity Louise Bush. They were preceded in death by Eddie's parents, Eddie G. Bush and Mary Frances Bush, and Joan's parents, Al and Ann Flipowitz, also preceded her in death. I want to share a psalm with you from chapter 121. It says, I lift mine eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade upon your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. I want to begin by thanking you all on behalf of the family for being here this morning and sharing this moment with us. What we wanted to do in my discussion, we wanted to make this very, very informal. So we've got some people that are already going to come up here and say something. So if you have something along the road that you want to share about Joan and Marie, I'm goofing that up good. About when I met Glenn, he was introduced as Glenn, and then somewhere he got the Eddie tacked on. So I may get that confused. So Eddie and Joan Marie, you're going to be welcome to do that at a particular time. Certain things that I had written down here that you might want to share some of the difficult times and share some of the happy times. It's okay to shed a tear. It's okay to have a little bit of a grin over some of the good times. Share what was most important to you about their life. Share what you will miss. Share what example you will follow from them. Share a prayer you have on your heart. Share what you would like to say to them, and share what's on your heart. One thing about both Eddie and Joan, neither one of them were wild about the limelight. They both did things in the background. So at this time, we're going to invite Al Sturdivant, the signer of their marriage license, to come up here and share something, a song.
I'm not going to climb the steps. If I climb the steps, I'm going to wind up falling down. So I'm just going to stay here. My name is Alan Sturdivant. Some of you may remember me as Ray Sturdivant. And I went to Royal Oak Congregation here back in the early 60s. I spent an enormous amount of time at the Bush's house. You know, Eddie, not Eddie Glenn, but Eddie the father used to cut my hair. And that was really pretty cool because he gave me much better haircuts than I could get anyplace else. Their mom put on enormous spreads of food. And I spent a lot of time with the family. There's a picture that goes around on Facebook that has me at their dining table, I think Thanksgiving maybe, Christmas or something. And I'm back in the back, and Mary's there, and Marie's there, and Kathy's there, and Mom and Dad are there, and there's somebody's foot sticking out in the picture. And we think it was Cheryl Cox, but maybe yes, maybe no. So Glenn and I grew up together. I didn't know him as Eddie. I can't twist my tongue to say Eddie, but I know that there's the reason why he went by Eddie. He was a great friend. You know, I could stand here and tell you stories that would curl your teeth. I'm not going to do that. If you want to meet me later on, maybe I'll tell you some of those. But we did a lot of things together. We spent a lot of time with the Metropolitan Detroit Youth Chorus. I drove a bus for many, many years. And it does my heart good to be able to be here today and to remember Glenn and Joan. One of the greatest things that I had an opportunity to do was perform their wedding 50 years ago. And that was a real special, special night. And I'm just grateful that I was able to come up here today and be with you. He was a great friend, a really, really great friend. And, you know, I spent a lot of time riding in the car with the parents, and I don't know if you remember or not, but there was one time one of the cars had a hole in the floorboard in the back. You know, and we sit in the back of the car and watch the road go by, drop little pieces of paper or whatever down there. So they asked me to lead a song, and I haven't done this for a long time, but we're going to try. We're going to give it a go. When we were teenagers here at the Royal Oak Church of Christ, there's a group in the youth group, and Mary was part of it, and Glenn was part of it, and there were a bunch of us that went to a nursing home every Friday night. And we sang for the old folks at the nursing home. And they wanted to hear one song over and over and over and over again. And I got to where I really didn't like the song very much. But now it means something. And it's Count Your Blessings. It's on page 118, and I guess they're going to put it up on the screen. And we're going to see how this goes. It's been a long time. When I feel you are tempted, lost, when you are discouraged, thinking all is lost, count your many blessings, take them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord has done. Count your blessings, take them one by one, count your blessings, see what God hath done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God hath done. Are you ever burdened one more thing I'd like to leave you with, if I may. I moved to Texas in 1986, and Glenn and Joan and I, we kind of lost touch over the years. And I want you to know that even though you've lost touch, you can always pick it back up. The last time I saw Glenn was in 2016, and I went to Big Boy with he and Joe Maxwell. And we picked up right where we left off so many years ago. So if you have that opportunity with people that you know and that you haven't connected with, please do, because it's really worthwhile. God bless you all. Glenn was amazing. He was amazing. I had a 1971 Mustang Grande hatchback car, and we wanted to put a tape deck in the car. So he took the doors off the car and laid the doors on the front yard at your house, cut holes in the doors for the speakers, wired in a tape deck, connected it to the radio, put a little switch on the side so I could go between the tape deck and the radio, and he put my car back together and the doors worked. He could figure anything out. And sometimes I kind of wished he wouldn't, but that time it worked well. Thank you.
Thank you. Al, you didn't tell people what a tape deck is, though. Nobody knows that. Huh?
That's right. Oh, that's right. It was an 8-track.
8-track, okay. Next, we're going to have John Jr., nephew of Glenn and Joan. He's going to come up and he's going to lead a song, and I think he's going to share some words with you also. Please come up.
Can I have all the children come up with me? All the children come on up. All the children. Lily, come on up too. Come on up over here, right here with me. Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. Little ones to him belong. They are weak, but he is strong. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. The Bible tells me so. So I'm John DiMarzio Jr., but I'm trying to decide how to tell you first my relationship. I was nephew to Uncle Glenn, but whenever I was in trouble or I'd taken apart something I shouldn't have, I was Eddie Glenn, because that's what my mom would yell, or Glenn or something like that. And that was because, Uncle Glenn, he, how would you say it? He was a geek before geeks were cool. Is that okay? Are you okay with that? Because, I grew up and I was, still in that early stage of being a geek and taking things apart, and I didn't put them back together as well as Uncle Glenn. But, but I got that trait from him, I guess you'd say, and later on, now I'm in the IT world, and so now it's cool to be a geek. But he could figure out how to put anything together, and as a kid, I remember us getting in the van, him getting all of us, and somehow, I don't know, all the family, our family, and I think even, there was like a van full of people. We go over to Canada and get pizza. I don't know why, but we would do that. But yeah, I think he secretly was involved with the military intelligence, because everything that, his van could do really interesting things that no other van could do. He had me convinced that the windshield wipers, they didn't turn on until the rain started falling, and they only wiped whenever there was enough rain to wipe them off. And I mean, I know now those were, delay intermittent wipers. But as a little kid, I was convinced, and he had convinced me, that when enough when enough rain had hit the windshield knew when the windshield wipers should go off. I don't know if it's okay to tell this one, but there was also another interesting thing about his van. That every so often, I really want to tell you this delicately, but you got to understand, riding in the van, there were certain times that there would be a smell in the van. Am I okay in saying that? Is it okay? And somehow the fan on the van would turn up, so that would always go to the back. I never figured out where that came from, somewhere near the driver's seat. But that van was, some amazing times happened there. I do remember one time in particular, the church we were at Romeo Church of Christ, and there was a big youth rally in the area. I had no idea where it was, but I knew it was a little ways away, and they were taking the youth group from Romeo, but I was too young to go, and I really wanted to go. I love to go to the youth rallies we have around here. We had some great speakers and singing and things like that in this area, and I wanted to go, but I was too young, so they wouldn't let me. Well, Uncle Glenn decided that he would take me to the youth rally, which was, you have to understand, it was super cool, because he had all the equipment. I mean, he had the cameras. He was YouTube before YouTube was YouTube. If there was an event going on in the area, he was setting up cameras and TVs and broadcasting signal and things like that. And so he was going to that youth rally, and so he told my parents that he could take me. And I remember that because I got to sit in the booth. Which is the most cool place to be, especially a geek like me. We sit in the booth and see all the TVs and he would wire all this stuff up the day of, and get everything together, and somehow, back in those days, it wasn't like pulling out your cell phone or anything like that. It took a lot of work to get all this put together, and he would always manage to put together. Well, I got to go, it was just a awesome thing to kind of, I idolized Uncle Glenn, and all the cool stuff he could do. And what's that? Well, as soon as you said that, I act like him. I kept thinking of all the practical jokes. Anybody remember ever being something like that? That's a family trait that kind of got handed down. I don't know if I got it as much as, I don't know, maybe that came with the namesake, but there was always tricks and jokes and things going on. But I remember him doing that, and as a young kid, being able to go and as I think about Uncle Glenn and Aunt Joan and just the life and the things that they did, and their love for children, their love for the body of Christ. I mean, you think about all the different ways when we talk about that the sacrifices and things that they made, and Um, I think of, I think of a couple different passages. I think of Mark 10:14, where Jesus says, "Let the children come unto me." I mean, that's exactly what they did through MDYC, through the Michigan Christian Youth Camp, through all the different things they were involved in. They helped facilitate, and through the academy, the Christian academy that was here, and just their sacrifice in helping to make through. And for a minute, I'm going to be. I hope I'm not. I'm going to be a Bush here for a minute. I'm going to kind of. There was very much a Bush heritage to be a gap filler, and so if you know the heritage of our family, to decide to serve, and to serve Christ's body, the body that God loved and sacrificed his son for. And, I also, the other verse that came to mind was Matthew 25. When you've done it unto the least of these, you've done it unto me. And I don't think, I think if everybody that got up a chance to say something, they would say something about, something that was done for them. A way that Aunt Joan or Uncle Glenn sacrificed and showed their love and care for one another. And that got me to thinking and about just exactly how much, what that legacy means. And I mentioned being a Bush, and that has a meaning as far as our legacy and from our family, and you for being a part of building churches. And it worked really well because the DiMarzio part of our family, that heritage worked together. And I know Aunt Joan being a part of that, and it's not a small thing to support and to be there and to love someone as they're working, and also love the work and serving, and I would say sacrifice to the church. And so I just want to read one passage real quick, and this is in Ephesians chapter 4, and as he begins this passage, is talking about the unity of the church, and it's talking about all the different functions of the church. And it says in Ephesians 4, verse 15, "Rather, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow in every way into him who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body, joined together and held together by every joint by which it is equipped, when each part is working together, makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love." And as I think about it, I think Aunt Joan and her sacrifice in serving, Uncle Glenn, whatever he did, being a geek, right? Nobody knows what those guys do. I'm used to that all the time. But doing that, each one of us has a function, and each one of us serves, and each one of us are parts of that body. And the lesson that I learned from them is that we serve with whatever God has blessed us with, and however God is. And so when you think about Uncle Glenn and Aunt Joan, you now are part of that legacy, and you are part of that. Whatever talents God's given you, whatever blessings you have, serve and love the church that God loves, his bride. And that will be a legacy for what they've done in their lives.
Thank you. I think I know him. At this time, we're going to open it up. If you would like to make a comment, as I said, something humorous, something serious, that's fine. This is a memorial service, and we want to share memories, and we're going to ask you to do that. Now, the less you talk, the more I will. Okay? The more you talk, the less I will. So what we're going to do at this time, if you would like to say something, have a memory to share, raise your hand, and we will actually bring the mic to you. If you want to do that, please just raise your hand, and we will bring the mic to you. And we would be glad to have you do that. Something humorous, maybe a certain difficult situation that you had come through, and some of the things about them that were important to you. If you raise your hand or you want to come up here, and that would be fine. Okay? Now, anybody else, you're welcome to do that at this time. Okay? There you go, right here. That'd be fine. Please, come on right up.
I'm trying to think when Glenn came to Royal Oak with the family. Does anyone remember that? What year that was? 19 what? 60. 50.
57.
57. Okay. That was a lifetime ago. So I knew the Bush family, and Glenn I knew from the first time he came here. I spent many hours with them. And I know probably with Joan, she's probably has to be an angel, like with many husbands. Okay, I would mention some. Well, what did Glenn? And she'd roll her eyes. Okay, which is wonderful. And Glenn, that room right up there in the balcony, many thousands of hours he spent, be it the morning worship, the afternoon worship, weddings, funerals, hundreds of them. Everybody knew him and appreciated him. And when we had youth rallies, he would help. The help he put was just, you couldn't count. Now, one year, and this goes way back, somehow he ended up with like 10 go-karts. Don't know where he got them. Now, so we were and we had the youth rally at the college in Rochester, okay? So we're going to have the kids of the youth rally could use the go-karts. So I tried out here in the parking lot, and I think he had it geared, however he did that. You know, he tinkered with stuff. I think 100 miles an hour they were running. And I go, Glenn, I think it's too fast. We got to tone these down a little bit, which he did. But he was always there to help, and I'm talking thousands of hours, free, that he dedicated. Like I say, Joan was an angel, you know, with husbands the way they are, to put up with some of that. But yeah, some of the stuff he came up with, I have no clue to this day. When we get to heaven, I'm going to ask him how he did some of that stuff. It was a miracle. But again, both of them were angels, and we miss both of them greatly. He was such a big part of this congregation for half a century. Such a big part. We couldn't have done it without him. So we thank the rest of the family for allowing to share him and her with us all these years. Thanks again.
Thank you. Anybody else? You're welcome to come up here. If you want to come up here, that would be fine. Okay. You guys are doing my work for me. So you're welcome to come up.
We always like Glenn's connections. So Glenn, 3 different things that I want to mention. One of them I'll just say was at the Palace. Of course, everybody knows he worked at the Palace. So whenever you'd go to a basketball game, he could get you down on the floor. He can get you in the back rooms. You could actually go and talk to some of the guys that played the ball game, and you could shoot baskets after. I remember one time with Becky's family, her brother was coming up, and he wanted to go to a Lions game, if you can believe that or not. Who'd want to go to a Lions game? But anyway, he's a big Lions fan. Of course, he's from Arkansas. Maybe that makes a difference. So in Arkansas, they didn't have a team, so he was in for the Lions. So he's coming up for a Lions game on Thanksgiving. So when he was up here, the basketball team, we went and saw a basketball game, and Kid Rock was at the basketball game. So his sons got to see Kid Rock. They got to see a basketball game, and the team they were playing against was Shaq. So they got to see Shaq, they got to see the Kid Rock, and they got to see the basketball game. And then we got to go down on the floor. They got to shoot some baskets. You could take them back. Another big thing I remember about Glenn was the Thanksgiving parade. And I remember Doug Shepard was talking about that, how we used to go down, and Glenn, he did everything extravagant. So he had scaffolding. He'd take all the scaffolding down way ahead of the parade route. You'd set up like 3 tiers of scaffolding. You'd be on the very top. You'd be eye level with the floats, as they're coming down the street. And we'd be out there in wintertime. We'd all have Kool-Aid. We'd make up Kool-Aid and drinks. We'd have everything up on the scaffold. And then the third thing was, like he said, he was great at wiring. So he'd wire the whole building, and he had the key to everything. But he could speak on the speakers throughout the whole system. So every January, we'd play hide and seek. And we'd play hide and seek. They'd turn out the lights in the whole building. People would hide under the pews, and all the rooms were open. We just, so that it made it really a fun game of hide and seek, because there's so many places to hide in the church. But then he had a speaker thing that would tell us when you're coming or not, when you got to be back, and when everybody was done. So those are like 3 things I remember that he did.
Thank you. Anybody else? You're welcome. Right over there. He's got a microphone for you, Kay.
I have known Glenn for 67 years. The first memory I have of Glenn, I spent the night with Mary in their house in Ferndale, and he smashed my fingers in the back door and thought it was hilarious. Also, I saved Joan's life one time. She didn't know how to drive when they got married, and after the kids were born, I taught her how to drive. Because, Glenn, he just couldn't, he didn't have the patience to teach her. You did it Glenn's way, or you didn't do it at all. And we went on vacations with them. One time we were going to Kentucky to see Joe's parents. And it was at night. That was one of the biggest storms we'd ever had. Cars were sliding off the expressway. It was at nighttime. They said, you have to drive Glenn's van. Because Glenn was tired, wanted to go to sleep. So we're going over an overpass. And everybody was stopped, but all the vehicles were sliding off to the abutment there. And I said, Glenn, wake up, because I'm not driving anymore. And I just got up and walked away. You've never seen Glenn move so fast. And we just had a lot of fun times with them. And Bradley is always going to be my little boy.
Thank you, Kay. Anybody else? Please go ahead. Right up here, Glenn Ellen.
Can you raise your hand, please?
Right here.
Okay, I'm not good at this, so, and I'm going to be very good because I've known Joan before most of everybody in here, except for maybe her sisters and people like that, okay? Joan and I worked at a nursing home, okay? And she started there before I did. And so when I came in, she was so sweet, we just became really good friends right away. And there was one time, I don't know if you've ever worked in a nursing home, but one of the clients there had a stroke, and she reached out at me, and she scratched me in the face. So I had a problem with an eye, and I needed to go to the emergency room. And you were talking about Joan not driving, no license, and that. And so I'm up in the front, sitting there, waiting to find out who's going to take me over to the emergency room. Joni walks over, looks at me, and she says, I'm taking you to the emergency room. And I said, no, I pick you up and bring you to work because you don't drive. I says, I bring you to work, I take you home from work. And she said, oh, no, I'm taking you. We'll just take and where this was is over in Warren. She says, we'll just take the back streets and we'll be good. So, and I says, well, what are you going to drive? She says, your Mustang. And I'm like, say what? So I was crazy, like her, and I let her drive my Mustang, and it was a really interesting ride to the hospital. So Joni was like that all the time. She was so much fun. Her and I, we would ride down Gratiot all the time, her and I. I had 2 places we did it. I would ride Gratiot with her and Woodward with Janie. So we had a lot of fun. So that's Joni. She was just very, very full of energy and fun to be with.
Thank you. Anybody else, please raise your hand. You're welcome. Yeah, there's a young lady here.
Years ago, when I brought my 2 rowdy boys to Luckett Christian Academy, and she would help me out so much with them. And then as the years would go by, we would sit in the back of the church, try not to get into trouble, but we just had some fun times. And I would do her and Eddie's triptych when they would do their little trips, and she enjoyed that a lot. But I just really miss her a lot.
Thank you. Anybody else? You are welcome to share a brief thought, a long thought. Right up here.
Yeah, I went with Eddie from the church group here. He'd procured some tickets for the basketball game in Pontiac, and I knew they had the best popcorn in the world out there. It was great. Detroit popcorn, but out there it was better. I don't know. And he took us down halfway through the game. He took us down on the floor, and we were sitting in these seats right behind the players' bench. These were for family of the players, and they're really nice seats, real cushy and everything, you know, and you can see everything down there. What a way to watch a ball game. So, you know, we were down there for 10, 15 minutes or something. So Eddie didn't want to be a hog with his privileges or anything. So he motioned to us, you know, come on, we'll go back to our regular seats. Number one, they were up in the nosebleed. And I says, I'm not doing those stairs, you know, there's no way. So everybody gets up and goes, and I'm sitting there, and Eddie's saying, PJ. And I says, no, I'm not with them. You know, I'm not with them. And I just turned around, and I stayed there the rest of the game. Nobody said anything.
Thank you. Anybody else? You're welcome to share something. This is what this is all about. We're seeing different angles. Or anybody, please raise your hand. You're welcome to share. That's what we're here for.
Okay, so I had the unique perspective of knowing Eddie at work before I knew him at church. I worked at the Palace from 95 to 2000. During my college, was my crappy college job, as I used to call it. But everybody knew Eddie there. I mean, he was the guy that I don't think they knew how to run the building without Eddie being actually in the building. So he was known by everybody. He always walked around. He was always friendly with everybody, which I liked. But he was a man on a mission every time he was in that building. I started coming to Royal Oak in fall of '99 and befriended Dan and Brad. And then all of a sudden I saw Eddie with his Palace shirt on. I just kind of looked. I was like, wait a minute, I know you. And so we got to talking. And at that point, now we were friends because we were attending church together, and then also friends at the Palace. So then I got the VIP treatment from Eddie, where he was showing me all the weird little places in the Palace that nobody else knew about, all of his little workrooms, and where he had all the secret stuff and everything. And it was great getting to know him. And obviously you can see the Palace isn't there anymore. So it lost its way without Eddie.
Thank you. Anybody else? Feel free. So thankful for you all. The things you share are very meaningful and important to this time that we're spending together. You know, keeping these memories alive. This is not necessarily all about closure. It's all about finding peace. Finding peace in what we found, what we saw in Joan and Glenn, and what they meant to us. That's what it's all about. And the most important thing that we have is these memories, okay? And keep sharing them. This is a time to do that now, but even at other times. Keep sharing these memories. Keep them alive through the memories you have of them. So is there anybody else? Glenn, come on up, son.
I'm my parents' youngest son, and there's a lot of memories I have with them because 16 years with my dad, 18 years with my grandma or my mom. One of my favorite memories with my dad is when he took us to the palace, and he would just take me everywhere. So I did learn the building a bit, and then one of my preferred times there with him was when he actually took me into his office and was teaching me how to work all the stuff in his office. He was showing me how he wired stuff up, and it was just amazing spending time with him. And my mom, she was special to me. She always looked after me. Whenever I had trouble at school, she was there for me, just patiently waiting. My parents were there for me at all times. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have anything else? You're welcome to do that. I'll start talking, and if you think of something, you raise your hand, okay? And I will be gladly be interrupted. But there's some things that I wanted to share my feelings about. I'm going to call him Glenn because that's how I knew it, and Joan, okay? Number one, I think this was very, very difficult. It came on very, very fast, very, very unexpectedly to see this happen so close to each other. And it makes it all the more, a little bit more difficult. But the important thing is these good memories that we share. Number one, I think they were a team. They worked together. Joan fully supported Glenn, and he could drive you a little wild sometimes because he had so many things going, but she was there for him. From a biblical standpoint, she did what a wife was supposed to do, and she was there, and I appreciated it, and I admired that about them and about her. And I think, he would, I think they would both say to you, and especially to the family, during the time of their illness, this went on for a long time. Thank you for taking care of me. Some of you had to do some things that were very difficult from a family standpoint to take care of them. And sometimes when people are ill, they're not who they are. They're not who they are. The illness, the sickness, whatever it is, changes that person. So maybe they would say to you, forgive me if I wasn't who I usually am during this time of illness. And then I think maybe they would say also to you, I forgive you. I don't want to carry that burden to heaven. I'm going to forgive you. And I'm sure that they would do that, okay? This is a time of forgiveness, a time of release, okay? Don't sit around waiting to be embalmed, okay? Okay, share what you're going to share. Share these memories and live your life. That's what they did. They went. They never did like and want to be in the limelight. All of what they did was done in the background, and that's the way they were, okay? There's a 2 Corinthians tells us in 5:1, for we know that if the earthly tent we live in is destroyed, we have a building from God, an eternal house in heaven, not built by human hands. When Glenn came home from the service, he was told, when you get off the plane, put your head down. Don't say anything to anybody. It was right after the Vietnam War, and there was a lot of hatred going around, and he got the brunt of that, unfortunately. This teaches us how important it is to take care of our vets. And he held that inside of him for many, many, many years. And that was hurtful and harmful for him. He tried his best to get through that, but it was very difficult. I know that. We talked about it, but it was difficult for him to do that, okay? He did not get a welcome home from Vietnam, but he did get a welcome home. April 23rd, 2020, he got a welcome home, okay? He didn't get it then, but he got it now. And realize something, heaven removes barriers. Whatever they are, emotional barriers, heaven removes them. Heaven unclutters life. It helps you see what's really significant and important. Heaven clears everything up. Heaven makes everything worthwhile. Heaven is rest and respite, okay? They're taking it easy. They're both taking it easy now, and we're grateful for that. I know Joan rather worked for Luckett, and I don't know how much you know about the name Luckett, where it came from a guy named Ronnie Luckett. My wife and I knew him. In fact, he was a professor at what used to be Michigan Christian College, and I was actually in one of his classes. But Ronnie was a quadriplegic, and he died early in life, and he couldn't walk or run. But there's a little thing, a stone, on the walkway over at the college, and this is what it says. Ron said, when I get to heaven, I'm going to run for 10 miles. That's what it's all about. Helen Keller, you know what she was all about. She said, you know, when you get to heaven, there are no crutches. There are no wheelchairs. There are none of the difficult things. It's like going from one room into another room. But in that other room, things are new again and bright again, okay? I think he would say to you, share what you have. They were involved in sharing. Wherever they went, they were both involved together. They shared in the ministry here and in the different things here. So do that. Trust God. Sometimes that seems a little abstract. Oh, trust God. But there's a depth involved in that. There's a depth that says, bring everything you have to God and let Him take care of it. I think they did that. They both were trusting in God. And I think they would let you know that God is a God of love and a God of forgiveness. And that's what we want to stand on today. That's what we want to share. God loves you. God loved Joan and Glenn. And He loves you. They emulated that love and their concern for others and what they did for other people. Ask what happened. What did he do at the camp? He wired it. What did he do here? He wired things. What did he do? He helped out, and she was very supportive of him. Then I think maybe they would lay a good foundation. Make good memories. Those are what you have. Make them good. Enjoy them. Enjoy each other. That is so fundamentally important. In 1 Corinthians 3:11, it says, for no one can lay any foundation other than the one already laid, which is Christ Jesus. Have a foundation for your life. I think Joan and Glenn had a foundation. Their belief in God, their faith in God. I'm not trying to paint a picture of two people that were perfect. They would tell you they weren't perfect. But they were saved through the blood of Jesus Christ. And you don't have to be perfect. All God asks is that you do your best. And I think they did. I believe totally in my heart the amount of time we spend with them, and I enjoyed every minute of them. And, of course, there's a little bit of practical jokeness in me somewhere. And so we worked good with Glenn, about that type of thing. So, and I think one other thought, and then I will close this out. I'm okay. Don't worry about me. I'm finally home. They welcomed me. They welcomed me like they didn't when I came home from Vietnam. And he gave his life in a way as a result of his time in Vietnam. Thank our vets. That's so important, that they be appreciated, what they do for this country. It wasn't his desire to go to Vietnam. It wasn't his desire, but he did what he was supposed to do, and he served God. And he served his country, and then he served God in so many different ways. That's what I want to share with you today. And I'm going to ask one of his favorite brother-in-laws, I'm the other one, okay, one of his favorite brother-in-laws to come and give us some closing comments and a closing prayer. Would you do that, please, Bill Perry?
On behalf of Kathy and Marie and Mary, as the siblings and the children and grandchildren, we thank you for coming today. It's been very beneficial. A couple of things I want to mention before we have our closing prayer. Glenn and I were kind of similar. We bonded pretty closely when I first met him because we're one day apart. I'm 2 years older, but our birthdays are one day apart. And we both had 3 sisters and no brothers, and so we kind of had that in common. Most people are about 80% water, except for Glenn. He was about 80% Dr. Pepper. And I remember one time, both Brian and Bradley may remember this, they rented a motor home and they drove to our house in Illinois. And they stayed in our driveway and slept, and he showed me where they had all the suitcases stored, and there was nothing but Dr. Pepper in all those containers, hundreds of it, it seemed like, but he wanted to make sure that he didn't run out of it. When he was in the military, he called one time, and I answered the phone. We lived in northern Illinois, and he said, "Bill, this is your brother-in-law." And I said, "Where are you?" He said, "I'm in a van in Vietnam right now." I went, "What?" He said, "Well, the government has asked me to set up this special line that can't be contained by people intercepting it, and so I'm calling you from a van to see if it works." And I said, "Yeah, it works fine." I was just amazed. And this was back in the early 70s, and here he is calling from the back of a van from halfway across the world or more so. We lived in Illinois for a while, and then we moved to Alaska, so we were away from the family for most of the formative years of all the children and grandchildren growing up. But we still kept in touch, and Glenn and Joan both were a tremendous influence on the lives of a lot of people, and I know how much you loved and appreciated them and what they've done for you. And certainly we want to be grateful to God that He allowed them to live in this area and work with you. And let's close this out by going to our Father in prayer. Our Father, our God in heaven, how grateful we are for this day. We're thankful, Lord, that we have Eddie Glenn and Joan to look at and remember, and all the tremendous influences they've had in our lives. We're grateful that we can share sorrows and joys, and that we can share the times that we really were helped by them. We're thankful for their family. We're thankful, Father, for the joys that we have of being your children. We look forward to that day where we have a reunion and we will never be separated again. We ask, Father, that you bless us. Please forgive us of our sins and help us to walk and talk as we should. We're thankful for Jesus, who was willing to die for each of us. In his name we offer this prayer. Amen.
You're welcome. They're going to have an ice cream social downstairs, and I think you're going to. We moved the fellowship hall years ago, John. You never told me. So, anyway, you are all welcome to say, and thank you again for being here to share with us.